Tangi tuze ni zonwe dawa tamje pangwe je tambe junen tenje kudam de la chanzen do Toni ninje zongdan juwe lang che je senze kanjin tenjeng Chana be mo tinzin janzo lo sowa de so ta ju chinjen lo Mananga da nyambe simjen tam 제제 된도 조베 산진지 공방 rinpoche 도바지 대체도 다 츠밤메 상황 자진이 니全国기 나네 츠밤메 다 카르조로 자진이가 당난 상황 자진 공상가와 전부기 아니 카르주고로다 tumzen dojira ting tundin jajene sungwe sebame tama junje ki ngane ene nganro chi nganro ane nangi nganro dene jezo dirim zorim zoba chenbo la sokba ta kari juguru ta kongsangawa chenbo rangi ene de yonsu zoba tayiba 송도 디기 토네 데네 맞아 드린 마 천년 쳐야 돼 딘디지 디기 토네 제 자모 데네 된 수진도 냠슬렘 발라 데네 그런다 근주 아니 도어가다 용수 조바이 잔주기 심 타입이 심전 탐제라 아니 제와 라나메바 시베 토네 심전 탐지지 된들라 아니 가서 끌로 자침보 되셔야 되다 개침보 토말들라다 끌로 자침보 되 개침보 진설에 대인자네 가서다 디기 토네 끌로 자침보 라야 돼양 랑다 제 꾼다 동에 만들어봐다 대완되봐 고 직송게 토네 아니 랑직베 텐도 마임바 타이비 심전 탐지 로아 리추 아니 강나 심전 네바 티시돌라 동에 만들어봐다 대완 되비 니츠기 나네 안가츠 다리 최자 첨부 된가서 냠슬래야기 고급 될 주네 마트 추든 될라 아니 심전 탐지 산진지 공방을 보지 토위 치들라 아니 가서 체니 마 시년이야 디치들라 년년기야 디치들 공방을 보지 랍드 아니 가지고로 다지 가지기 다 산진지 공방 세나더니 가서 디티서지 공방 예고서와 어리 당부 지고로 다 냥르오
The great fifth. Can you hear? Yeah. No? Can you hear now? Okay. So no complaints from the back, yeah? Okay. Oh, thank you. The great fifth Dalai Lama revealed many teachings that he received in pure visions, and they are collectively known as the visions or the visionary teachings that are sealed in secrecy, the Samagyachen. Within the 25-fold division of these instructions, methods, means, and so forth, we find a profound method or sadhana of Amitayus. And this is renowned as the parameter of the Vajra wheel. And so when we look at that particular method, that particular means of achieving awakening, we find that there are preliminary practices and the actual practices, and they are in and of themselves divided into various divisions. For example, we can talk of the outer preliminaries or foundational practices, the inner preliminary or foundational practices. Thereafter, we kind of merge with the practices of the secret mantra Vajrayana. Therein, we find the practices of the creation phase, and thereafter the completion phase with characteristics, and thereafter of the great completion or the great perfection. The fifth Dalai Lama, within the collection of teachings that are sealed in secrecy, these visionary teachings, compiled the quintessence of all of these practices, and we find them kind of arranged very nicely, particularly within what are known as the supporting instructions for this instruction manual or method, or sadhana, if you will, of Amitayus. Now, when it comes to receiving the teachings, the preliminary teachings which are going to be given over the next few days, it is imperative to make a great emphasis at the beginning on what is one is receiving, of course, the teaching. What's the point of receiving it? To put it into practice. And so accordingly, at the outset, it is imperative to set our motivation, or to frame our motivation. In other words, to give rise to the correct attitude within which we are going to receive this instruction, the motivational speech, if you will. And in addition to that, it is important to reflect upon how we conduct ourselves when receiving the instruction. And we find that within the sutras, and similarly within the tantras, there are specific methods or means, ideas if you like, that need to be implemented, and it depends upon which we curtail our behavior. And within those ideas, within that kind of behavior, and then we will the teaching will be given, and you will receive the teaching. Understanding it will then serve as the catalyst for you to put it into practice. From within the two, the motivation and the behavior, in other words, the principle and the container, if you will, bodhicitta as a motivation is paramount. When we reflect upon the word bodhicitta, the wish to awaken for the benefit of all sentient beings, on the relative level, on a basal level, if you will, it is important to bring about a concern for others, a concern for oneself, of course, but based thereupon, a concern for all, a great love, if you will, for all sentient beings who exist throughout the very reaches of space. This is extremely important. When we reflect upon ourselves, when we kind of look within, what do we want from life? Of course, on a relative level, we want to be happy, and we wish to avoid unhappiness. In other words, we would like to have comfort and avoid discomfort. We would prefer pleasure over pain, etc. And all other sentient beings, regardless of their aspect, regardless of where they find themselves within the six denzins or realms of existence, want exactly the same thing. We are all the same, wishing to be happy, to be comfortable, and wishing to avoid unhappiness or discomfort. And so we can then look at the understanding of comfort or happiness in two perspectives, a temporary one and an ultimate one. And it is imperative when receiving such instructions that, of course, the temporary should be taken into consideration. Nevertheless, it is the ultimate state of happiness, if you will, the state of complete and perfect awakening, that is the complete relief from the subjective experience of dukkha that makes up the experience of a samsara, that is imperative, that we ourselves experience in order to be able to lead or guide each and every sentient being to that very state. And so accordingly, at the beginning, we should all, each and every one of us, give rise to the attitude that I'm going to receive this instruction and put it into practice. And the reason for that is to not only liberate myself, but the liberation of oneself, the state of awakening. The point of that is to lead each and every sentient being to that very same state. And with this motivation, we shall proceed.
Bunzongelen jiwen dunbengum tayen duwe jawa gungwe malu sheja jishin siben do shajen zo ndela chuba bu.
그게 자스니 라서 내내 아 다치 넘버 장암나라 베 마부지 육도서레 근데라 에 마부지 페디샤 내내 아 참말로라다 가든체 주야티 당부 주주제샤
I believe there are many of you listening on Zoom or whatever it is, Facebook Live or whatever. Anyway, through the internet. So I'd thank you for taking the time to join us. Welcome.
야 아니 다 한다는 것은 내가 가르치나 차비지 거기도와 아 차비지기 토네 같은 로고와 송장 제 넘버 다 넘버 다 파면이 넘버 마인바 넘버 살도 제네 아니 딘데요와 인장 행가서 내가 저와 간듯이 제와 이나 저기 미유지 거기로와 미유 될라 때네 차비지 거기로와 아니 될라 때네 아니지 직전준 제야제 용거로와 대송장 단에 에너지 산진지 최대 이제 덴바니 람탑시니 제부꾼인데 아니 수수기 미유 녜젠스도 생겨야 돼 개침보래 챙기도.
When we embark on anything really, we need a kind of plan. Whatever the activity, whatever the job, if you will, if we understand the destination of it, the point of it, where it's leading, etc., then we'll be able to kind of progress in that direction. And so when I kind of look at most of you, you are what we might call New Buddhist. New Buddhist means that you're not a cultural Buddhist. You didn't inherit the teaching of the Buddha from your parents. And so as New Buddhists then, we have a kind of new eye to look at the teaching of the Buddha. We can be a little bit objective, if you like. Understanding the teaching of Buddha in and of themselves, thereby the actual implementation of the practice, the path, that will give us the impetus to actually put the teachings into practice with great effort, because we understand the destination. We understand how we can actually get to that place, and so we'll put effort into going there. And so generally we talk about the ground of the Four Noble Truths, the first teaching of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, the path of the two truths, and the result of the two dimensions or kayas of awakening of Buddha.
대송장 되는 가서 양초에서 직 수수 남준도다 배 가지고다 지 로한 로버즈다 다지 타티 로버즈 임바 마임바 이제 템바니 아니 라바 대가랑기 근접 템바다 전담 템바디 칼라 맞수 미세나라 아니 롭종 제야당 아니 롭종 디 미유 수수 대반 되바 인장 동해 만되바 인장 아니 동해 셀탑당 대화 준답이 체도라 아니 롭종 나초버지 여대로와 니 참말로와 이제 템바니기 니추기 토네 아니 총대바레 마도 이제 템바니 마임베 시샤지 아니 미시반다버지 렌도와 대송자 가초고 가레지이나 지용기 왜 니추 치야지 제바이나 주 냠래 제바이나 되니 자와 가르치 제바이나 드부지 다 직소솔라 라 고그로와 드부디 라왈라 드부 텔라양 아니 주 메바다 주미 제미 주튼 겐도진 드부지 용시기 마르와 대송자 주단 튠바 아니 대화 튼드 니와 대가랑라 대비 그 튠비 토네 대화 공ber트 땅야 동해 만두비 초로반디 주 튠비 토네 동해 지용와 인장 디예 주젠 테즈디 매바스 제야기 탑 나츠기 몽감 리바단 셈감 리바 니기 토네 잠링 시부 티칼라 아니 나츠 셴 나츠부지 여데로
Whatever we do, as mentioned, we need to understand the kind of the path or the practice, the way of doing things, if you like. And so when we rearrange, for example, the way things are as the ground, we can talk of the way they appear and the way they exist, respectively, the conventional truth or relative truth, and then the ultimate or absolute truth. And so whatever we do kind of fits within those categories, fits within the relative, leading to the ultimate, ultimately. Now when we reflect upon these, what I've referred to as the two truths, within the relative truth, where we kind of abide, if you like, therein what we find is that everything we do is relative to something. It is not the ultimate because it is relative. And so when we reflect on our practice is within the relative world. And when we talk about engaging in kind of practices, for example, when I use the word practice, this can refer to any activity, whether it be spiritual or otherwise. We understand the task. We understand its objective. We understand how to actualize it. And thereafter, we give into the practice. That is to say, we undertake it, or we do it, if you will. And so, when we reflect upon the relative world, we are indirectly reflecting upon cause and effect. If we gather the necessary causes together, then the effect will be, hopefully, as planned. Now, when it comes to the relative world, cause and effect is not random. It is actually quite scientific in a way. If we gather respective causes, they give rise to their respective results. And the results are in accordance. The results or the effects are in accordance with their unique or particular causes. So in other words, the result is compatible with the cause. The cause gives rise to a similar effect. And so when we reflect upon our mind, the state of our mind, in a way the relative world is there to support the way we perceive the world, the way we interact with it, the way we feel with it. And accordingly, when we talk about states of mind, whether they be within the secular expression through science, psychology, and other disciplines, or within the spiritual world, when we talk of gathering causes together, these causes should be of a particular type because we would like the result of happiness, And so accordingly, we need to understand what are the particular kind of actions, causes. What do we need to do to get to that particular result? This then is the kind of elementary reflection that in a way we all do all the time within the relative world.
All so te inzan da shin ngongam riba da sengam riba to ne te tsa chim bu yo wa inza tene nga zo karju ro da ji dina lamba zamo chene ja chembo ro zi ha ho wa ina shirap di kha chene nga zo yi tanda zi trin tu ba ina ani nga zo chu che ba ina tene ji debu yo ba ji tang jikden chewa ina debu yang thaba yoba chikthang dongge mande wande yang ane tap na chowe thone ane dongge de khale chenyung su tone tar dongge tsawane meba chewa yi tapsi yoba yinza ane digi thone nga zu gomba jeya chikche dewa ina ane ji negap dewa gongge wangbo 왕보락바 기 쪼율라 때네 하는 가수 시베 분조라 소바기 대화 디솔레이나 아니 대화 뭐시바 대화 이나야 체진도 임바 아니 타투기 대화 간데 임바 대화 되니다 동에 mende 니기 셈데 간데스 임바 아니 셈기 랑진데 가레즈 임바 Dela tene ane ngachu nga laya thang nge laya gi ane khorjuk dizo chinangi khorjuk la ngachu jingyong persum cheya gi tartuk dewa lana meba chi ane ngachu gi trin thobya la jojin chongbo chukbu chi ngani goba yinjang dene kapsu phaba ta karjugorugo ngonro silane 다 산진지 추기 토네 다 저지 주바이나 다 ngösupa 산지 좀된 데기 추이노라 ngö수 주바 토네 거하지 제바이나 만지가 이제 말에 챙기도 산지 좀된 데기 추인데 다다 로니동갑자 가레이나 딘디 다리 안주디 가초 로아 끈라 동에 만되어봐다 대반 되어봐 로아 끈라 펜텔라나 메바지 임바 송장 대양 점젠다 덴베토네 ngachogi deduk laya de tinjungi 토네 용고 여바 인장 데네 tinjung 데니 중위 니추기 ngane 아니지 최 탐지네 랑지 니룩 칸디 임베지 차진 몽보지 송와 인장 아니 대빈 중네 인데바 점제 몽보지 도알라
These days, as you know, we can look at things from a variety of ways in our pursuit for comfort. We have psychology and psychotherapy and various other kind of disciplines. Similarly, we have modern science in its various kind of branches and so forth. And these are extremely useful for bringing about the temporary benefit of sentient beings, of others, if you will. And they are also extremely, in some cases, extremely vast and ever-evolving. And for their implementation, we need wisdom. We need to use our intelligence rather than kind of leave it outside, so to speak. We need to understand the subject matter. Therethrough, we'll be able to understand if it is correct or not. Therethrough, we'll be able to understand its implementation. In other words, again, we are reflecting upon cause and effect. Within the relative world, gathering the right causes that we will put together with their respective conditions so as to experience then the desired result of the moment, so to speak. So again, we are talking within the relative world. we can talk of relative results, and similarly, within the spiritual practice, we can talk of ultimate results. These are basically based on our intention and the particular methods that we are using. Ultimately, when we reflect upon our motivating factor, we are trying to remove the impediments to our betterment, to our well-being. And then when we reflect upon refining that process, we will find that we are refining the relative world, ultimately to its exhaustion, leading then to the relative. But for the time being, we are starting with where we are, so to speak, and accordingly, we should then reflect upon the temporary world, the relative world, the conventional world, if you will. Herein, as mentioned, and indeed, as in our experience, we are all looking for comfort, happiness, if you will. And this comes in all shapes and sizes, doesn't it? For example, we have the temporary pleasure that is afforded us through engaging with objects through the doors of the senses. Then we have our subjective perception. This leads to ideas and thoughts, and so on and so forth. It gets more and more subjective in a way. And similarly then, when we start to look within, we look at an object, the way we interact with it through our sense consciousnesses, then our perception, and after our perception, then we have our ideas, and what lies beyond the ideas, what lies in the habitual tendencies, therein the kind of collection of imprints that we have that make up our kind of being, if you will. If we keep looking within, so to speak, where do we end up? We end up with the nature of mind, the natural state. And here, to hold, sustain, and increase this particular tradition of getting to that state, then we have these practices that have been kindly distilled from the teaching of the historical Buddha. When we reflect then upon the teaching of Buddha, this is after all a Buddhist teaching, and so it's useful to reflect upon it, the source thereof, the Buddha. The Buddha's teaching, collected together, is referred to as the Dhamma, and this was taught more than 2,500 years ago. And why did the Buddha teach it? The Buddha taught it because sentient beings had the same characteristics then as they do now, just that the aspect is different. They wanted happiness, comfort, wished to avoid suffering, discomfort. And so the Buddha gave the methods that are as relevant today as they were then, in order to bring about kind of happiness, in order to get this temporary benefit that we would like, whether in a small level or whether in a greater one. It depends upon the gathering of the respective causes and conditions. Because nothing is independent, is it? Everything is interdependent. Therefore, everything lacks autonomy, independence. Everything is dependently arisen, or, that is to say, mutually dependent. If we gather the correct causes and conditions, we will hopefully experience the result we wish. And similarly, in the past, 2,500 years ago, this was the case for everybody, and similarly, it's the same today.
그래서 되네 띵중인 비쯤제 안에 하는 가수다 지 동네 빵주요 바당 아니 대화 접주요 봐 니갑다 타투 용수 조번디 아니 락시데 최 탐지네 땡진제바 용와 인장 아니 아주 섭주 접주요 바당 공배 동주요 바당 만들바 참마 빵주요 바디 당가서 탑시 랑진 코라 최 탐지 땡제 인장 땡제 이 주소 아니 디 가지고 그러다지 때나 팝 터봐 이나 한가서 딥빼 메시 계지 모른다와 빼라지나 다 Mungam Ribada, Sengam Ribas, Yonda Sula, Tani Daya Chiyerwa, Dene Nasola, Tijundu, Lutorgi Dongenda, Semsorgi Dongenzi, Yetiroa. Te Songza, Lutor Layagi, Luye, Chashi, Druya, Yiza, Pami Kutala Dene, Maso Lutoy, Druji, Mambozi Chungdiroa. Dela Dene, Dene Namshi Laya Dang, Lu Laya Nide, and Gazo Tambo Chungdang, and Tama Tedang Tizudi, Jiptazi, Gombajia, the kitchen boys are Tengidu. That's some no course on Waina, Anne Pame Kura Duba Zamge, Anne Ko Semjen Chagu Marawa, Semjen's love young do, Anne Semda Demba. Perajina chi zubra chero la soba tito de semme pambo layata semde layaji chajenzi yongde gore chowa dongenda chowa dewa ji nichuji tenshi wadi semde ane detugi nichuji dang meba jungi gi chachu ningiya yodewa hangjila chik detugi chowa yodewa da chik detugi chowa mebe tone du 아니 양 제일 두 제일 닝기 찍바 임발라 찍라 대뚝 내주 매와 찍라 대뚝 내주 여바직 도와 디주디 가서 냠랭 가라 더나 제대 배 계신 보지 맨로 챙기도 대송장 다 류초르기 동에 쪼 셀탑 제야 돼 뭔감 리와 되네 신 야제 또그 땀송 아니 욕보 준당 다 세리 samji meja wazi tombozi pedorwa digi tingning gaso hallebi pendo jachimbuzi chadorwa 동네 망부지 셀답 총을 대바 망부지 주답 총대 유로와 나 디치보기 대와 줍투기 면도와 다낭 샘강 리바 라야 딜라 델라데니 코랑라 양 동네 셀답 대와 준답 라야디 키침부 슈즈르노와 디 다레 당보 다지 템바니 라이지디 군섭이 네츠잉하네 숙자체로라 소방하다 예전에 친하게 최탐지 군섭 템바스 직체 단담바 템바스나 아니 가서 나와 딱도 아니지 착받다 셴바 네츠디 쩐디 아니 셀비 탑 단담바제나 군섭 코랑기 ngoam korangi niluam semina sem korangi rangiam deni tende ye chu kaina korangi rangi ngoy nichu shiatela tendamba sungedwa di chama ji susugi yakbo ze chen songwaina ani rangi sem layata lu layadia daga za karzoru maimba 그런 거에 니치 여러와 동네 만들베 대반되베 샘지 여데리 디기 댄사 지니 여데로와 다출 냠낸 체디 디 참망로와 고르브 체시나 시럽즈 카체시와이나 아니 랑도르기 네디 마노르바지 시샤지 수수기 땡수케바지 용그로와
Accordingly, spoken about gathering causes, conditions to produce a particular result. When we reflect upon ourselves and our interactions with others, etc., the pleasure and pain that we experience, these are kind of results. And these are results that are the effect of previously engaged causes and conditions. Now we've spoken of the relative world and also the spiritual world. And within each we find that there are methods or means of gathering causes and conditions, etc., to produce particular effects. And so we can talk then of gathering something or removing something. Within the relative world, when we reflect upon the experience of pain, if you like, discomfort, if you will, that we would prefer to be free of, we ask ourselves, is it possible to be free of this? And the answer is, of course it is. But why? If we reflect upon that question, we can only come to one ultimate conclusion. We can affect the way we interact with the world because the world doesn't exist independently. Our experiences within the world similarly do not exist independently. Why? Because they are mutually dependent. Why? Because they are the effect of previously gathered causes and conditions. So to rid ourselves, the possibility of ridding ourselves of this undesired or unwanted experience of discomfort is possible because of the mutually dependent, or the dependently arisen, if you will, nature of things. And so this is what we are going to tweak, if you like. This is what we are going to work with in order to remove the discomfort that we do not like, that we do not wish to experience. So it is important to understand this. For this is then the kind of ground of our very being, the mutually dependent nature of things. And indeed, when we look under what we'll put under the auspices of modern science, we can talk of two particular disciplines, and they are of course interconnected. But let's simply say the science of mind and the science of the world, other than mind, if you will, and therein we include the body. These two kind of branches of science are respectively used or utilized in our world to remove discomfort, pain, if you like, from respectively our body and our mind. When we reflect upon the body, in a way, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? We were conceived, there was a period of gestation, and we were born. Effectively, we can say we were born from the fertilization of an egg by our father. Or, to use a Tibetan way of putting it, a mixture of blood and semen. And then when it comes to the mind, so we have the form coming from its respective causes. But the mind of the present moment, then, we can reflect upon what is often referred to as the causal continuum. The causal continuum then didn't arise from the fertilization of the egg within the womb of the mother. Rather, it came from a previous moment of mind, and therethrough we can chase mind backwards until we basically get tired, because there is no start to this. And so we reflect upon ourselves as a composite, as a mutually dependent composite of body and mind. And we, as individuals, experience various things. For example, we can talk about the 5 objects of the senses that are proffered to us, if you will, or to our mind, if you will, through the 5 sense doors. We then perceive a particular object, and we have a feeling about it. Perhaps we like it, perhaps we don't like it. And then based thereupon, we act. And it's interesting to note here, from the understanding of mutual dependence, if we like a particular object, and that object is likable in and of itself, independent of the subjective experience, then everybody should like it, right? Stands to reason. It's independently likable. But that isn't the case, is it? Something that we like perhaps could be horrific to another. And so here we can reflect, based thereupon, on the interdependent nature of things. And so this is a reflection, a contemplation that is extremely important, so as to come out from under the influence of this projection and subsequent reification of independent autonomous existence. When we reflect upon the world, this is how the world functions. We can talk of science, medicine. Within the branches of science we have medicine, don't we? And whatever the branch of medicine, whichever tradition we follow, it is there to deal with physical discomfort. And great advances in medicine mean that things that would have proved unbearable a very short time ago can now be dealt with successfully, thereby extending the period of temporary kind of happiness of the individual who has visited such a doctor. But this way of understanding things, this then mutually dependent understanding, is of course within the relative world. And the relative world is where we find ourselves, isn't it? We reflect upon the ground of being. Everything that we experience is either within the realm or is understood as the relative truth or the ultimate truth. There's no third truth, so to speak. Within the relative world, what we are dealing with, or the conventional world, if you will, what we are dealing with is the way things appear to us. And the problem is we get addicted to our interaction with various objects and base thereupon ideas, base thereupon attitudes, which are subsequently reified and taken, or we confuse ourselves to understand that, or rather to believe that they exist autonomously independent. But, nevertheless, when we look at the mutually dependent nature of our interaction with the relative world, if we look at its very nature, what we trace it back to is a mind, a relative mind. But when we look at the nature of that, then we find the nature of mind. We find then, when we investigate the nature of mind itself, we come to then the understanding of mutual dependence on the very subtle level between the subject and the object. Hereby, when we can reflect thereupon, when we reflect upon ourselves as a composite of body and mind, an individual who experiences pleasure and pain, but within this understanding that we are in and of ourselves a composite, and that which we experience or feel, if you will, is a composite. And based thereupon, we come to understand the mutually dependent nature of things. This understanding we can call wisdom, and this then opens up our entire being in a completely unique way.
라서 테니 다 가서 값을 봐봐. 당당 상황 자체 공사 나비기 디게다 응원로 빼 답대고 조금 말이 답대고잖아. 다 한번 쳐버리자. 가르쳐보러 다 치응원로 아니 난게 응원로 라야지 탄이 따얀디 가서 만들비기 동에 디기 빵탑 제약이 아니 가서기 섭지 마 짜면라 수소 하고야 지들라 아니 텐조니가와 라야다 아니 코르이님이 제 메다와 아니 레전드 코르이님이 타르베 페여 신이 댄스세라네 다 섭지 넘바 디게 토네마 칭은로디 아니 공바지 토야디 케치무지 인사레.
And so, the wisdom of tweaking the relative world so as to get to the ultimate nature of things, the ultimate expression of which is the state of is awakening, state of complete and perfect Buddhahood. Then we have within the quintessential methods of the Great Fifth Dalai Lama's secret sealed visions, we have a kind of recitation manual which kind of puts together, or rather brings together, the pith instructions or the quintessential meditation techniques that we need to utilize as the method or means to overcome the experience of dukkha or pain that we would like to be rid of. And so understanding the what are known as the outer and the inner preliminary or foundational practices, we should generally refer to the outline of the preliminaries. Within the outer preliminaries, there is an outline into 6. There is initially then the reflection and contemplation on the recognition of what is known as the precious human experience, or birth, if you will. The second is reflecting on its impermanence, a reflection upon our inevitable death and the changing nature of things that leads thereto. There is a reflection of the faults of remaining within the conventional world of cyclic existence, or samsara. Thereafter, there is a reflection on that which holds us there, the unmistaken law, L-O-R-E, law of cause and effect. Thereafter, we reflect upon the benefits of the state of a liberation, that is to say, of leaving or liberating ourselves, getting out of, if you will, contaminated existence or samsara. And the way of doing that, then, there is the cultivation of a relationship with a qualified spiritual teacher. So this is the general overview of the outline of the outer preliminary practices, which is useful to understand at this point.
All tene da jir ngondo la di ani da sanji sanji langala doyaji ta nguspa doyaji chajinzi imata.
And so when we reflect upon the practices, foundational practices, what are they? They are a path which leads where? It leads directly to the state of awakening or Buddhahood.
Deyang sanji da langa la ya dia chila maimba ate nang simni töter özen domachi la ya di simji kunji rangju la yöde ba yinjang di ane ngondu juya la ane thoma lamsang di ngondu jur mato ba yinjang asemje tamji sanje ni yönja lobur time dip tima teser sanje ni songa nangji da nga sogi tangbuti tima di ma selne dacha shedang timugi ane karzoro da chi nangni matumi jutsu tizu de ma sel tabla ane ngondo de che de ngoji di ane semya rangji ngondo jurba di ngondo rogo wa yinza ane kirim da zorim la yaji ane ngoji di da deso yinza chilo la ma yinba che di ko de won ra chi che wa yina de ni nyumo rakpa tisu di ma pangya la ane tabshi ni zungre ito ne nyumo rakpa khandis pangure di kyu khandis gore di jen khandis gore dene nyumo tramu di pangya ane tarbada tamji chenbi kombang layaji za chenpo zi masu drupju yue deba zi da ane ji drurung yin deba gi ane langa zi yue zang di yi to ne ngonro laya deyang ngui ji ta simni druje yue zin doma chi di toya chi do la ta jirim zorim dezu di chi do la ngui su ta nyumo nga zu rakpa di ngo zhuya yin bada.
So mention has been made here of a path. Now when we use the word path, what comes to mind is a place leading from one or where we find ourselves to a particular destination. And so here in the Buddhist terminology, path is an inner experience. So the inner experience and the refining of said experience, that is designated as a path. So it is not an external path, but rather an inner path. An inner path leading where? Well, in a way, it's not really leading anywhere, because it is a method or a means, a cleansing product, if you will, to cleanse that which obscures the innate, and what is known as the innate luminosity, or the Buddha nature, if you will. This uncompounded luminosity that is the nature of mind is that which at the resultant state is simply rendered evident in the moment. Rendered evident in the state that it can never be obscured again, for its nature is fully manifest, fully evident for oneself. Now this nature, the uncompounded luminosity, the natural luminosity that is the awakened nature, is not something that one needs to bargain for. It is rather the nature of mind. Accordingly, everything that possesses mind, every sentient being, if you will, has this innate luminosity, has this Buddha potential, or nature, if you will. So then the question arises, well, how come it's not manifest? If you're saying that this is my nature, how come I don't feel that I'm awakened? The reason is because this is obscured. The naturally undefiled, uncompounded luminosity that is the nature of mind is, at the time being, for all of us, completely obscured. Now, even though its nature is naturally luminous, we cannot access this, we cannot experience this because of the obscuring factors. The obscuring factors then are both gross and subtle. We can talk on a gross level, for example, emotion, strong movement of mind, feeling if you will. On more subtle levels, our ideas, perceptions, habitual tendencies, and so forth. These are the obscuring agent that needs to be cleansed, if you will. So what do we need as an individual who has an idea that I would like to awaken, I would like to experience this Buddha nature, I would like to wake up to my true nature, so to speak. What method do I need? And here then we talk of spiritual instruction, meditation instruction, that we fully understand through initially receiving. The method then, the cleansing product, and the putting it into practice, the utilizing it to clear up this obscuring factor, is then the path. Whereas the result thereof, the actual experience, is to recognize the nature of one's mind. And here, having recognized that, then one simply sustains that to the point where it is rendered fully evident. Now, this isn't an easy task. It is one that requires great effort. And as with anything, we begin with that which we can kind of get a grip on, so to speak. So when we reflect upon ourselves and we look within our mind, we find that we have a kind of torrent, if you will, of emotion, of thought, of ideas. I'm right, everyone else is wrong kind of thing. When we have that, it is important then to understand that all of this, whether we like it or not, whether it's pleasant or not, needs to be cleared up. And so the preliminary practices are a way or a means or instructions on how to deal with, how to first acknowledge and then later deal with what we might call the kind of gross or obvious states of mind. When we remove them, what comes in its wake or is the path and progress on the path as we deepen in our cleansing or removal of that which obscures this innate nature that we all possess. And this then is the practice of the so-called preliminaries. The so-called preliminaries are to remove the very gross levels of mind, the obvious ones, if you will, so as we can get, in a way, get a grip on the Buddha nature. And that then that becomes the actual practice, remaining within this natural luminosity until it is fully rendered evident.
Lasso. Denindang, Khandro Layandi, and Semgang Ribada, Ngongkang Riba, Zavi Yoba Di Tone, and so Semgang Riba Tone, Ma, da, Tuyunguri, Inayang, she Goju Jigla, Semgang Ribada, Ngongkang Riba Ninde, Tapeten Tembazi, 냠도 로고야 돼 매도 메롱와지 차도요래 팅이도 땡아즈데다 잠링 찌데라 다데 케체부 쉬어드래 팅이도 아니 점쟁 가르세나 가서 단다 받을라 잠링 나라 대시에 짜치주데 쪼다 ngongkham rikpe thone zo de yachi tongwa yinza samgam rikpe thone da ji shiragi tarja chimbo da tonangzi je tobi mebe thone 달래 zelera da tarja thiram yishu tsaji dinala ane nga zo nyokra mambu shibze da 강에 mambu shibze ane yartöngi thone jego da ina trading yi chane teni ji koryu yarje dangya 잠블링 끈데라 아니지 참아 통자다 퇴자다 야지 라나메 버지 종여레 예나양 대다 찹지 아니 양 잠블링데 하정지 신앙차보다 아니 미기 지소나라양 아니 시디 라야다 심 대지 라야데 대서 갈래 갖고 쉬우지 레바 송장 디 논주디 ngongam rigbada semgang rigbade nyingede ngoyu nichu tenla phaba yinjang ani dinidi nyamdela royaz perajina ngacho semdang luni nyamdo yuri ana sem layade loksu deo sengazung meba yina ngacho la chorba dongeda chorba deba dewe tone semsena dire kesha shigor mado dini ji ngubu 가도 입에 와지까네 기시 시유 말아 대독이 초와지니 대독 초와 진이 덴디지라 셈세데 유로와 대양 르라 땡고도와 다양 르테양 밤에 쿠라리 또그 땀숨지 주제 마모 지글라 땡 심대양 심디게 아니 양 깨지 주위 랑지 내성하냐 아니 땡중지 다지 자침배 남자 마부지라 댄데바다 아니 데바다 다다바다 마음바 라소바다 다다 마다 추르다 마추르라야기 주제 마부지 여바 인자 셈당 너츠 드네 되는 가서이 디지초와 인자 류셈닌데 뜸바 나지 왕감직바다 생감직바닌데 다 냠도 drogo야 돼 백케침보 아니 미직 시티 트비알라 데니 냠도 메도 메롱와 인자 꾸라 데낭지 임바 인자 잠블링데 시티 랑가라 카초 주르코와 예나 semgang rikbada ngongam rikba denyinde ani bete oy nisu telam pamne lalen tarya digani chuwaina deyang kari jogoro ji mungde maimba tawso maimba loksu tagasi loksu maimba 수수기 어이네수 땡람팝 아니 땡바 쳔마 땡주 쳔마 냠뇽 쳔마 랑랑 수수기 카왕의 참비지 아니지 고 노에 초박만에 어줘야지 대두기 니주디 안 덴디톤이 이치 패바기 나서기 자주 뺏어바이나 뺏미지 짜침무지 용도와
The preliminary or foundational practices are primarily instructions that are to be kind of digested inwardly, so to speak. They deal with our attitude, with our mind, if you will. That is the principal emphasis. Saying that it is not that there is no reliance upon anything other than the mind, for as you know, our body and mind go together, and indeed, whilst they remain together, we are said to be alive. And so accordingly, even though the principal aim of the digesting, that is to say, putting into practice of these preliminary practices, is the training of the mind, and this goes along with the kind of looking after our kind of body and also the place where we find ourselves, the world, if you will, where we place ourselves, if you will. And this is the kind of general way of viewing things, isn't it? Body and mind kind of go together, and we put ourselves in positions that bring us kind of comfort, bring us happiness, and we try to avoid situations that would give us an unpleasant experience. And so primarily, as mentioned then, the digesting of the teaching of the Buddha in general, and these preliminary practices in particular, revolves around the training of the mind. It is an inner development. And this is extremely important, but we should reflect that nowadays this goes hand in hand with the outer, our physical, and also the environment within which we find ourselves. When we think about the development of the world, we can talk of two things, kind of outer development and inner development, if you like. When we think about outer development, indeed we even use the expression the developed world, don't we? Therein we find that there are such advancements, whether it be in medicine, whether it be in the protection of the environment, whether it be then that which we kind of utilize in our day-to-day lives, presumably to have a more happy and pleasant experience of things. When we utilize all of this, what happens is we make use of the developing world, but through our addiction to the developing world, over reliance, if you like, on the relative world. What happens is that our mind gets kind of left behind. So these days, when we look at the world, it is not a pleasant place. It's becoming more and more scary in a way. As we notice these great kind of fast developments, interconnections between peoples, countries, etc. The development is very fast, but people, it seems, get left behind. Why? Because in a way, the advertising is so strong. If you buy into it that your happiness and peace of mind comes through something external to yourself, then you are bringing about your own downfall. So it is important that just as there is outer development, we need to look within. And having looked within, we need to reflect a little bit upon our inner development. Because the idea of peace of mind, well-being, happiness, delight, if you like, these are things that are difficult to come across these days, yet we all want them. Place where they are developed is the mind, not something outside of the mind. Independence upon something, again, this is a possibility as we've heard, but an over-reliance on something other than one's mind will not bring about the comfort that we would like to experience. Because this relies or this demands kind of inner development. So here, when we look within ourselves, it's important to reflect on how we get to the bottom of it. How do we really bring about this mental comfort that we would like to experience? And so starting from the get-go, if you like, looking within ourselves at the moment, our physical body, if you will, is, as you know, kind of a collection of causes and conditions that have been already brought together. There's the kind of fertilization of the egg, the moment of conception, if you will. Thereafter, gestation, birth, and we are all grown up. When we look at mind in the relative world, in the moment, what we notice about mind is that it is what is generally termed as a causal continuum. We talk of the continuum of mind. What this refers to then on the relative level is the momentary change of mind, with one moment of mind leading to another. Past, then there's the kind of turnaround, and then before you know it, you have the future, then you have the kind of turnaround and the past. Past then leading to the future, what we call the present, is simply the turnaround. These then depend upon one another. Now, in order to understand then, when we talk about the mutual dependence between body and mind, is to reflect upon this, the relative nature of both of them. We need, of course, to develop our mind, but in order to do that, we also need a physical. We need to put ourselves in the right environment. And accordingly then, we should use our intelligence to place ourselves in a position within which we are most easily able to digest or integrate the instruction so as to bring about the experience or the development, the path, if you like, of mind that we would like to experience. Now, this shouldn't be done in a foolish way. Here, one should use our faculty of human intelligence in such a way that we completely understand what we are doing. We shouldn't just follow something because somebody told us, or it's the tradition or custom, etc. What is important for us as Buddhist practitioners, followers of the Buddha, if you like, is to be able to determine on the basal level what is a valid teacher. Having understood what a genuine valid teacher is, the point of having a teacher is to receive teaching. Then, using our intelligence to digest the instructions or teachings that we receive, we understand whether the teaching is valid for us at this particular moment. Because then when we digest that particular teaching, what is going to happen is we'll have a valid experience. And that valid experience then, the realization thereof, is something that is extremely important to have oneself. Why? Because in dependence upon that, one will have a great trust in the experience coming from the teaching, coming from the teacher. Therefore, the trust in the teacher will be valid because it is based upon not only the relative world of reasoning, but more to the point, on the valid experience that we ourselves have had in the first place. So this, as I mentioned, leads to valid kind of trust. So if we use religious language, we can say faith. And to have a faith based upon these validities, valid teacher, teaching, experience, realization, and so forth, is something extremely important to develop within oneself.
라쏘 당근도 거주인도
So now we actually start.
다 지난 순욕지 감중 카쟁이
I hope you're not bored.
코르비 출라 쪼심제 쓰다 당부 니니 딘디지 송난도 왔어.
So the first line reads, develop a weariness with samsara and its ways.
다음에 뭐지게 당아츠디 심밭 마부지 깔리 마부당 강에 마부여자네 다지 람림 기니츠데 코르베 기니츠다 쪼베 니츠 마부지 아니지 시라 텐다 메바당 카둑 셈라 마베야 저르지 다 공바지야지 냥가 여레스.
So here there is for example, when we look at the general presentation of the divisions of spiritual practice, or the levels of a spiritual practice, here we kind of are not going through kind of the enumerations of things, but rather getting to the heart of the matter.
다 딘디 인사 말이다 상망게 공바디 시럽 카체네 그래서 딘주 유추 상말로 봐 야보지 쳔바이나 아니 거를 독도 자침보지 공바지야 용서와.
So this doesn't mean that the way of writing here is incompatible with the kind of vast kind of enumerations that we find in other graduated stages of the path or graduated stages of the teachings, traditions, etc. Rather the instructions are here essentialized. It is the quintessence thereof, if you will.
Korwe chula chosamje sedi dinala zo gongba yadi korwe chu ta nga chu sibe phunzo za chimbo je yorwa ane di temba druba jine dendubje nawandu gakko gusare tingedo temba druba gi nawade susu charsongwa ina deni nyoktra khande silongido sena ane Döcha shedan timuk naksem nesim lokta chado la soba yinga zugi sim matuwa da sim mashiba sim na nyokra nga zo pe kaduina kale kadeya da kaduina ichi meba chaya di kandis chago resena nga zugi pukyang ringbo la samno madawa sene kang nawa da kang sharba sibi punzo de temba drubazi dela teni chakba dela teni shenba shuk chenpo zi lewa songza tenpa zhuwa di mewa zuwa chi tu yinza re chingido.
To develop a weariness with samsara and its ways. So when we reflect upon samsara and samsara's ways. So samsara then, as you know, is sometimes translated as cyclic existence. That which perpetuates it is this contaminate, its way, if you will. So here we're encouraged to reflect upon the phenomena that make up samsara, all of them without exception. Our problem is that on a subjective level we project a sense of true or independent identity, reify that and act thereupon. So here a weariness then here refers to a weariness of remaining under the influence of the perpetuation of the idea of independent autonomous existence, its reification, and then acting under its influence, the experience of which is the contaminant which keeps us in the experience of dukkha. And so here we are going straight to the heart, or rather the writing goes straight to the heart of the matter. To reflect upon being tired of remaining within or under the influence of this confusion, or to put it another way, this fundamental distortion of reality. When we reflect upon that which brings us so much difficulty in the moment, in life, if you will, we can reflect a little bit on dullness and overexcitement, of course, but here we should really reflect upon the particular disturbing emotions that afflict us. The mental afflictions, if you will, such as anger, attachment, addiction, aversion, pride, jealousy, the usual suspects, along with the wrong view. Wrong view here then means to look at things as if they exist independently, to have that outlook, so to speak. And so here it is important that we should look at the way things actually are, and then the way we are interacting with them. We need to taste, if you like, the teaching, to understand the way things are, the way whatever appears to us, whatever arises, if you will, within our mind, it doesn't exist autonomously, independently. And to continually view it so is to perpetuate the difficulty that we ourselves would like to be free of. And accordingly then, when we reflect upon how long we've been doing this, it brings to mind a sense of weariness. And that's what is encouraged here.
De machi wachiane dine ji korwe chula chosam je gondo da nga chu chi lega sama yage yin dine ta ji gom ji je yin serane chawa mombuji ji cheba ina takba yesa mare thingido di nga so khari juguru da korwe chula chosam je layandi ko 덴바 드르번 짐비 토네 아니 가솔레 쫑 가르라고 차당 데니 심 슌바 아니 강다를 심라 마지바 낭이나다 치나다 낭기 침상이 바르이나 아니 수수찌보로 만도 이치메바 찬로에디 가르진 차당이 리거래 내 나지 잠불리지 자급 튼데메바데 가르차고 요리 차당 리거래 차당디 덴바 칸디스 두거 칸디스 징거 소소기 삼지나나 디스 디 삼당고에 빼 메시케이션 보인서리 팅도 추탐지 띵중인 바 인장 랑직보 된다 아 침장능라 장와이나 파마 보고지 제심라로 그래 아 데니 침장이 이치라로 그래 데니 딜라 송와이나 랑라 초와 대화조에 디 추로 그러와 대송장 데니 차당데 마시니 셈바 창보다 덴바 딘디토니 지와이나 아니 침장 코육라이나 제비랑지 심시데 파페보 아니 치 자카비 니친라오지나 잠블링데라 찌찌라 아니 이체와 찌찌라 펜도체와 찌찌라 야체 땅야 총레체 데니지 즈트라치 로 레차데 마솔 고데고레 zubu딜라 고데고레 니kabla 배주 땅 고유레 대사 고그리스 칼라 고그레 데 강다로 왕부 딜라 니kab지 고유여와 타나 산주 엔진의 메나 아주 디게 말에 딜라 튠진디 빵구레세는 디 디기면도와 디 고유여서레 딜라 덴바 드립 소나 덴바 진 소나 수수기 데니 차당이 니승안에 쩐 대수지 탕와이나 데네 오 코르웨 추라 조심제스 내니 내가 비기 마솔라 배주 당양즈 베라지나 zubu디야 가서 내가 배주 당야리 캉바디야 내가 배주 당야리 또거디야 내가 배주 당야리 내양 끼직끼직라 kon junro birangji 동게 birangji 인나양 디 푸숨 소비지 류디 초고르 아니 땡고르 체릉보 땡고르 네 메바 용고르 자와남 람룽 용고르 페제 용고르 예 꾸라 데차마 랑지보 마체 꾸라 펜디치야이 차제 용소보 고르 디 빵고 마레 팅도 고르 이나야 차진 딜라 룩룩다 트로지 코란 템버 드림니 짐바 아테스니 젬바 슈크쳔보 제바이나 아니 골로 쳔보지다 미쪼보 랑직보 아니 랑 니초 니라야다 드라라야다 아니 심디 수수수수기 마지바 슈즈 조기도와 나스 상말로 치 자카비이나 니지 던저리 아니 코륙 최선의 주요메이나 잠블링 시보된 가족이 자침보스니 야고야지 쭈메와 아니지 코륙 상말로 자침보 야고야라 니 방야 말고 디 고그레 디 튠진디 고기도와 용지대서 맞추와치네 야고즈가서 야토바이나 가족이 된자 여보 용거로와 디 나지 가서 나은기 셈기 용지라 튠진 드바이나 나나 암시시 튠진 아니 또나 칼라이 튠진 차나 아니 돌로이 튠진 디 라소바 튠진 드즈디 빵자 말에 팅이도 디 고그레 콘네가 빈바디 시랍 배주 땅네 내가 배주 땅이야 레마도 고 짜침보지 콜라 짭수 줘야다 아니 콜라 이치치한다보다 짜침보 쉬우지 임바지 디 드르기면도와
It is imperative to use our wisdom, or we might just say kind of common sense in a way. When we read, develop a weariness with samsara and its ways, we may think, okay, I've reflected on the nature of samsara and I don't really like it. So therefore I'm going to give it up. I'm pretty weary of it. So that's it, I'm off. and we give up our job, and we're wandering to some foreign land and think I'm doing Dharma practice. But what happens? We don't have the cooperative conditions to sustain that lifestyle. And it doesn't really work out. And perhaps we get fed up or upset. But here, the fault is not with the instruction. It is with our understanding of it and our subsequent implementation of our misunderstanding. Weariness here then refers, as I mentioned, to the projection of true, independent, autonomous existence. And then the subsequent reification of that. To be addicted to viewing the world through that glass, if you will. To grasp onto it, to hold onto it. And when we use the word that is often translated as ignorance, if we use a different expression, the fundamental distortion of reality, it is that distorting factor that allows us to react so strongly to particular objects, projecting a sense of likability onto something, we hanker after it. Projecting a sense of dislike on something, we push it away. It's the basis of giving something up or aggression to push it away from us, etc. So here the weariness that is to be given up is to come out from being under the influence of these disturbing mental states or negative mental traits. To come out from under their boot, if you will. And so, we should reflect time and time again on the true nature of the relative world. And no matter how it appears to us, no matter how attractive, we shouldn't put any trust in that, the idea that things exist truly, independently, over there. If we do so, we will give into negative mental trait, emotion, and so forth. And that, as the causal condition, then will give rise to action, with the results of which we'll have to incur later. So, we should reflect upon the nature of things. We keep hearing this time and time again. How is that done? We should just think about something. Here, there is nothing that is off limits. All phenomena are mutually dependent. Whether we like it or not, we depend upon other things. If we understand the mutually dependent nature of things, by doing so, in and of ourselves, we'll come out from under the influence of these negative mental traits. What comes in the wake thereof is a mind that is more open, calm, relaxed. So if we think about the immediacy of our situation, if we're able to be weary with being under the influence of these disturbing emotions, we come out from under their influence. Our mind is more at peace. This will automatically affect those around us in our family life, where we find ourselves, whatever kind of place we live, house, wherever, those who we directly interact with, our family and so forth. Nature will become calmer, and therefore the family dynamic or the dynamic between friends will become greater. Everyone will benefit. Whereas if we reflect, okay, I'm going to become this kind of great yogin and renounce everything, etc., and we leave the family life, it can be that we miss it. We'd like to go back to it, and perhaps we can't, and that will bring us pain. Or perhaps we can, and it's not as before, and again, this brings us pain. So we are kind of adding to our burden through the misunderstanding of the wording of the first instruction here. Through understanding the nature of things, our mind becomes more at ease, as mentioned. Thereby, the mind becomes more comfortable, naturally becomes more loving, more kind, there is more concern, empathy, and so forth for others, which leads to altruism. Within such an attitude, everybody benefits. in order to develop such an attitude within oneself, we need to, as much as we're able, implement these instructions. For that, we need to be alive. Pretty obvious, right? But to be alive and implement these instructions, we need to be healthy. So accordingly, the body has particular needs, doesn't it? It needs to be in an environment that is conducive to it. Similarly, it needs to be fed. Similarly, if the elements clash, we get sick, we need to take particular medicines, and so forth. And if we are going to utilize this body, utilize the environment within which we find ourselves for the spiritual pursuit of awakening, then it is important that we put ourselves in a good environment, a clear environment within which we are best disposed to engage in spiritual practices. And similarly, it is imperative that we take care of our body, because it is in dependence upon this vehicle that we are going to engage in the practice of the digesting of these teachings. Now we should understand that everything is temporary. We know that. Things change. And accordingly, we are healthy 1 minute, and then we eat the wrong food, and then we get sick. We all know what that's like, right? Things change. We're healthy 1 minute, and then we're unhealthy. And then we're unhealthy, and we get better. And everything seems to go back to normal. But the body is still in the nature of change. When it is sick, we need to take food. We need to rely upon perhaps a physician who can dispense a particular remedy. And having received that, we should digest it, take it, partake of it, digest it, and give ourselves the time and space within which we can recover. And so this is important, because we talk about the vehicle of life. In a way, this particular body that we have is going to take us on as far as we can go on the spiritual path in this lifetime. Therefore, it needs to be healthy, it needs to be fine-tuned. We need to have a long life so that we can make the most of this precious opportunity. And so accordingly then, we need to take as much care of the body without grasping at it. And this is an extremely important point to keep in mind. We are taking care of our body, we are taking care of our place, our environment, etc., but we shouldn't be addicted to it. Addicted in the sense of going back to this fundamental distortion. The distortion factor then, the contaminant, if you will, when you talk of contaminated existence, the projection of autonomy and the subsequent reification thereof, leading to addiction thereto, and based thereupon, emotion, negative mental trait, and action leading to reaction or effect. So what is important is to give up this grasping. Grasping at what? The independent nature of things. Where does it come from? Our own projection, our own distortion of the nature of things. So this is important to continually, as I mentioned, reflect upon. Because what is important to reflect upon is that this projection of autonomy and subsequent grasping leading to these negative mental traits brings us in the moment and also in the future difficulty. And the point of our practice is to overcome this difficulty. And so, when I say utilize cooperative conditions to put yourself in a good position to practice, in my opinion, I really feel that we need medicine, we need food, we need clothing, we need the cooperative conditions of life. But the point here is that we shouldn't take these things, medicine, food, clothing, house, whatever, as our kind of refuge in a way. Thinking that it exists autonomously over there. And then that's it. It will never change, etc. On the relative level, it's in the nature of change. Ultimately, it's never existed. And so here, the point of the matter is to come out from under the influence of this distortion and acting under its influence.
Lasso. Dini nga zo da hang dar korwe 다 출라 조심체라야지 맞춰 샘지 이게 내가블라 되니 야 korwe 쳐다 되지 정말로 된 거야 차들어와 아니 대송장 디주디야 집신 차와서 싫어 배주당니 하고와치 되니 다양 대신 뭐 수수기 세미 장신데라 korwe 준 디기 세미 장신 마통와 집에 인장 되니 korwe 쳐데라 하장기 다 딜리 하즈 매바다 다데 카르즈 미치나나 다 예나 매나 아니 카르조다 잡다 쥐방건다 뽕니 저러다 수수기 자와 강신에 약슈 대제야 돼 너버리스 디 너버리 디 조심제 고그레스 가인세나 디 카츠 짜지 보이나 가지기 세베편조 주베랑이 동네베랑이 아니 저 타만들 루치랑이 인자 딘딘랑 마체스 이난테 짜지 뭐 싫어레스 고그레스 타니스 말롱와 지야데 패키지 뭐 인사래
We can similarly reflect on samsara and having a kind of weariness for it, in that we are perpetuating the same experience over and over again. So one kind of reading into the word translated as weariness here could also be kind of boredom, in the sense that no matter what we do in the relative world, of course, there is a temporary need to do this and to do that, and we need to rely upon certain things to remain alive, etc. But we need to use our common sense. We need to use kind of our faculty of human intelligence, wisdom, if you will. We need to probe the nature of experience. We talk of Buddha, and we understand that the nature of every sentient being's mind is awake. That's its nature. But the point is, it sounds nice, possibly attractive. But the point is, we don't see that. We don't experience that. We are not awake. But you say it's our nature. Why aren't I awake if it's my nature? The reason is because it's obscured. If you look at the word, kind of samsara, what it really means is to be under the influence of this contaminant, or that which obscures. And this isn't partial nor random. The obscuring factor obscures everything. Absolutely everything. So even what we may, from within the various activities of our lives, what we consider as the most important job, action, activity, etc., it's still flawed in the sense that if we don't understand its nature, it is still going to be or contribute to the obscuring factor. That which obscures this innate luminosity, that by its very nature is awake, the Buddha nature, or the Buddha element, as it's sometimes referred to. So no matter what we do, at all times and in all situations, the need is to come out from the influence of this distorting factor, this obscuring factor, that which obscures or dirties or sullies the innate Buddha nature. And our efforts should be there toward. We should be weary of continually pampering to this nature and to come out from its influence. Not be too particularly bothered about what's around us, rather using it to deepen and enhance our practice.
라서 다들이 맞아 편다 당보기 제바지용을라 디젠자 첨보지 토네 그래서 최지 돌린 개바상보들이 정발이 같은체 내 참으로 한다 개와 뭐야라 아니 너무 도지창 산지 찌산지 템바 셈지 디지 용수 저버디 다 산지 템바 진니 찌우 당발라라레 인자 아니 저와 이노 저베 담아 참으로 Tenzi jibu tabana kuzi teyang zirinji ya tema ze zamling gyula pende drumnyen ye ane kangsa yongsu zoba kuzi shabe teyang ane yang nemuk chuksu jeba tang handa dan jikden dila ane ji dogo tamsum la soba susu soki deba khangi samalwa trashi tuandrubi ngane rubi chedola ane ngwa malam shiro na diringi chudun dagazi jagi.
And so now I'll conclude our meeting for today. So today is the 15th day of the first month according to the lunar calendar. It's considered an extremely important or auspicious day. And so I would like to thank all of you for coming here, giving me the opportunity to talk about the Dharma. You also had the opportunity to listen to the Dharma. So here through, with a good motivation, we have accrued a great amount of positive potential or merit. And I would like that we now, together as one, or one voice, if you will, dedicate this to the longevity of he who is likened to a wish-fulfilling gem, who cares for the teaching of Buddha in general, and specifically the temporary and ultimate welfare of all sentient beings, is known as the Dalai Lama. And that all sentient beings have health and wealth and happiness, everything that they need in terms of temporary happiness and welfare, but ultimately those conditions serving as cooperative to actualizing the spiritual path. And with this auspicious prayer of dedication, then we'll conclude for today.
Chanju Zimju Rinpoche Maje Banan Jeju Jewa Nyamba Meba Kone Kondo Peba Shu Tunyen Dawa Rinpoche Maje Banan Jeju Jewa Nyamba Meba Kone Kondo Peba Shu Jeba Tsurim Rinpoche Maje Banan Jeju Jewa Nyamba Meba Kone kondo peba shu Peche shuje medo chang risha linje nyende jemban Sanjen shindo mide baba Drugen namda shindo jebare shu Idang guru rin mendalaga niya daya Ne pama simjen tamje dedan tenju Nyendro tamje tado dong Chanju semba kanan sejo Teda kunje monon je Toni nyenge zongdang jube Chijir senze kanjen tendeng Chana bemo denzen jazo Sowa deso jenden nendu Sho nyenge zongdang jube Chijir senze kanjen tendeng Chana bemo denzen jazo Sowa deso jenden nendu Toni nyenge zongdang jube Chijir senze kanjen tendeng Chana bemo denzen jazo Sowa deso tuyi yerme sho jam
Khandro Tseringma Rinpoche
Tenpa jikten kamsum chenpa dan tenpa nye shendo senpa Tenzi punu shendo tenpa tenpa yuri nebe trashi sho Jenen zewa ye sejen jabe chenga kanjen Yongso jajen molong kanze ba jenzang den den yerda jaba Langdo chunye zambe tenche dang chusong toje todang dende Dende lume denbe dajay denbe gyeme nyandru sho Yeme laye go ngane jadong game zambe Yine dedong jurmen dorje Leja dunye nandro trashi sho Bedan zoa mange Yije nobo pansanji Semje rewa konde Samban drube trashi sho Tamban jikden kamsum chenpa Tamban nye shendo sema Tenze punu shendo tenpa Tenpa yurine 자시 쇼 자시 니몬데레 쳔데레 니메 공양데레 님젠 다도데레 군주 숨제 자시 쇼 Thank you.